You're listening to The View from Up Here, an equipping podcast by Viewpoint Leadership and Development. Our vision is to cultivate a change in the way the world views leadership and development, and our mission is to foster better leaders through a modern approach while developing individuals into their true selves. My name's Brad Walbridge, your host for our time together, and joining me in our conversations is our president and founder, Josh Trout, and our COO, Joel Archeri. Josh, Joel, thanks for joining us.
So happy.
Yeah.
And enthralled to be here.
Absolutely.
Josh, how about you?
I'm excited. I don't know if I'm as excited as Joel is, but
yeah.
I'm excited.
Well, I mean, first episode
It is.
Yes.
of doing all this together.
It feels
we're,
great.
We're finally here.
I love how you say that feels great.
Yeah.
It feels great.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us right at the beginning to kind of let our listeners hear the why behind all of this. Like, Josh, the genesis of all of this coming out of your mind, how you've brought, Joel and I into your vision for all of this. I know they'll have a chance to understand a little bit more about backgrounds, but can you walk us through where Viewpoint came from, why that is so significant? Just start unpacking that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. As a leader, I've had to work extremely hard to get where I'm at right now, and I've had a lot of peaks and valleys that I had to go through personally, and where a lot of people that are in leadership seem to have an easy road. That's something that I did not have.
Yeah.
Right. And I've had a lot of poor leaders in the past. I've had people that I looked up to, that I yearned to be a mentor to help develop me, and they fell short, right? They weren't there for me the way I needed them to be there. So I think that through my own life experiences and through the struggles and the failures that I've had throughout my life, I've identified the need that we need to take a different approach on how we develop people. We need to have a different approach on how we lead people. Through that and through my own experiences as a leader, I've had the chance to cultivate a culture and a way of developing people that has seemed to work. When you see that and you see the way that people attach themselves to that type of leadership and that type of vulnerability, it made me say, hey, something's here. Yeah. And I think it's something that we needed to take a deeper dive in.
So when you think about, what's driven you to this point, how much of it, you were talking about leadership failures along the way, and I know there's been good leader situations and bad leader situations, right?
Yes.
How much of this is coming out of a place of being frustrated with people that have led you, and how much is coming out of a place of I think about this differently, and I want to inspire people in a different way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a great question.
There's a part of me in situations that is driven by, I'm so frustrated with that, it's got to be different. But then there's also a piece of, I'm motivated and inspired in these ways, and I want to share that with other people. Can you break down between the two for this?
Absolutely. I think that the difference is I've had so many struggles throughout my lifetime, not just in, my professional career, but in my personal life, in itself. And I think that while that has, it's definitely made me who I am, I have taken a look at how people have failed me in the past differently than most. Instead of having the poor me, I have been determined not to be them. I have been determined to never allow someone to feel the way that I have felt multiple times in my life. So that has really been the driving force behind that. So instead of having that poor me mentality, it's something that I do think about on a daily basis, and I'm determined to make an impact in people's lives. I love people, and I know there's a lot of struggling people out there. There's a lot of broken people out there. And if I can have just a small portion of their success by treating them the way they deserve to be treated, to develop them the way they deserve to be developed, motivate them, and hopefully not only make well-rounded individuals and employees for other organizations.
Yeah.
But those that are going to take that leadership track, we need to break the system that we're currently in, right? It's not working. And the way things are moving in our world, in our country, I've realized that if you don't jump on board, you're going to miss out. So, my goal is, and it's driven by, I will never be like those that have done what they've done to me, or those that have not done what they should do for me as my leader, and put those skill sets into others to pay forward, if that would make sense.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that is my guess is that you have been thinking about this for a number of years, or something like this.
Yes,
right?
For years.
Can you walk us through the kind of the origin piece, like where it all came from, as far as what you envisioned at the beginning, and how that has changed to where it's coming in now? Like when you first think about it, when you're first inspired to do it, you're thinking from one place.
Yes.
And then how that has evolved over time to the point that we're now sitting here and we're actually talking and we're actually doing this.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. What's funny is it doesn't go, it goes pretty far back, right? It's not just about during my career, but it goes back to even in my elementary days, believe it or not, right? The struggles that I went through, having learning disabilities, and so many things that can take a whole nother episode to go through.
I'm sure we'll get to those too.
I'm sure we will. But I feel like I've had people that have failed me as an individual, all the way dating back to elementary days, that, you don't have to be a boss, right, to be a leader. You're a leader in the home. You're a leader at work. You're a leader at school as a teacher. Leadership is very broad. And I think that I've learned from the struggles that I went through and how I was kind of left to be on an island by myself and drowned. And I've had to either sink or swim, right? And I've had to pull myself up by myself. Because my own family, while they loved me and they supported me, they didn't have the skill set either, right? They didn't have the skills to give me to figure out how to make my life better and work harder to overcome a lot of those things that were thrown at me. So I've had to do that work on myself, right? And I have just, unfortunately, through most of my life, have been let down. And, from teachers to guidance counselors to basketball coaches to past managers and past leaders, when I did get into my career, it just, looking back at it, I was just so saddened by how things went in my life. But, it's amazing how you don't realize where God's taking you in your life. And then where I'm sitting at today, it was all for a greater purpose.
Yeah.
And this is it, right?
Yeah.
I've learned from those issues. I've learned from people failing me and not being there to support me. So it's not just about leadership. It's not just about being a boss or how do you lead a team of people. It is about understanding who an individual is and what is their greatest need, right? We are all different. We all have different ways of understanding and different ways of learning and loving. And it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what we've done in everything, specifically in school, right?
Yeah.
We're going to teach you one way. And if you don't figure it out, it stinks to be you.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. And so that's where I've taken all of those things in my past and including in my career and put it together and said, you know what, we need to come up with a better way to connect with people and find out who they are as their true selves. Right. And we have to adapt to them.
Yeah.
They don't have to adapt to us.
Right.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
but
it does. And so that brings us to Viewpoint, leadership and development, but really the podcast and that being a resource, an equipping resource for leaders, like putting all of this together you look towards people that can help you bring that to fruition.
Yes.
Enters in Joel.
So good.
So kind of walk
I don't
through
really
the
know Joel.
thinking.
Who is that?
What?
I don't know
He
Joel.
picked me
Who's-
up off
Oh,
the street.
Joel.
Joel, yeah.
Julio.
Goodness. And this is going to be a thing. That's the crazy thing is people who are going to start listening to this podcast, long-time listeners.
And they're going to think there's two staff members or
they're
two
gonna be like,
people.
Jewel. Who's Jewel? And then there's Joel. There's
And then
like
there's Joel.
Jewel the singer.
And then Julio.
Yeah.
Yeah. So walk us through the kind of the thought process of bringing Joel in, the why behind that, to be a teammate with you in this endeavor. Like unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it's a God-given skill. I could be wrong, but there are certain people that I come across in my life that I just can feel something, right? I can feel a connection. I can feel maybe their struggles or maybe their sadness or whatever it may be, right? And you know, the funny story about Joel is the first time I'm at church, right, and we're going through the day and enjoying the sermon, and the first one was done, and we're getting ready for the second service, and here comes this tall guy with this beard that's trendy, and he has really good looking shoes on, and I'm like, that brother's got some good shoes, right?
The shoes are the focus.
The shoes were the focus. I'm liking the shoes. And that's what was, to be honest with you, the very first thing that you know, connected me to Joel. I'm like, hey, he got some good looking shoes, right? Yeah. And we make that a joke now. We laugh about that. But
because that was the first thing I said to you when we actually spoke.
Yes,
because we were in the discovery class for the interest meeting for our church.
Yes,
just for the church. And so you had already noticed my shoes.
Yes.
I hadn't noticed you yet because I hadn't met you yet. And we went and we sat next to each other. I was like, amazing shoes. Your glasses are on point. And you were like, thanks. And then I realized you didn't have a Southern accent. And I'm like, oh, kindred spirit. You're from the North. Great.
Yes. And I was like, that's funny you say that. I thought the same thing about you.
Yeah. Because Joel, you're from...
So technically I'm from southeastern Virginia, but we had just come down from Delaware, which is the worst state. Don't ever live there.
And to anybody living from Delaware, just cancel all of that out.
Yes.
Sorry, yes, you are probably fantastic, but there are a lot of people that aren't.
Yeah.
And we moved down there fresh from the North, and you can just tell, like my parents are from the North, so you can always tell when you're around people who are from the North, because there's more of a more of a verboseness to like how they live their life. They're just kind of like unabashed. Who cares? I'm just going to do what I want. I'm going to be who I am. Whereas in the South, you have to be formal. It's kind of bred into you. And so you meet Northern people and they're like, hey, I like this about you. You go, you're from the North. Southern people are like, hi, it's so pleasure. It's just a great time. Great to meet you. So nice.
Yeah. That's great.
And the part of the North that Josh is from is...
Yeah, so originally from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So born and raised in south of Pittsburgh. And prior to moving down here, I was in central Pennsylvania. So a PA guy.
Yeah.
And I am thrilled to no longer be a PA guy. Sorry.
We're not making the North sound good when we're both like, if you're like,
it has nothing to do with you.
Delaware,
it is the weather.
Don't be there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So beyond the glasses and the shoes in Discovery class,
that?
what is it that makes you say as you get ready to go on this adventure?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of this endeavor, what is it about Joel that says, all right, I need to have him as a teammate?
So you know, I think that it would be shameful if I wouldn't state the obvious, which is he's a man of God, right? So that obviously is attractive to me because that's what I want to align myself with. You know, I want to align myself with the right people. Yeah. And I just love this personality. You know, he's an outgoing guy. And you know what was unique though, and I don't think I've ever really talked to you about this. I could tell as we talked and we got to know each other that you weren't happy in your career.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that you weren't happy with the path in which you were going. And it's unique that as we just had some small talk. Yeah. And he found out who I was and what I do for a living. He started asking questions, which as a former business development guy, that's who I am at the Soul. I love when people ask questions, right? Discovery questions. So when he's asking me that, I'm like, all right, I'm liking this dude because he's digging, right? Yeah. And through those conversations, we got to realize that we had a lot in common, especially about wanting to develop people. I think that we were all also both hurt in many ways by others, right? And how
is it hard to admit that? Is it hard to admit that, but as a leader, it seems like the culture of leadership is Teflon.
Oh, what, that I'm indestructible?
I can't tell you that
cry.
you've hurt me.
Yeah.
So I think even that is a part of setting what we're doing apart from others.
It is. And and I think that going back to your question about the whole process of Viewpoint is my approach to leadership is led by vulnerability.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of CEOs, there's a lot of leaders out there that are afraid to do that because it's a sign of weakness. Well, those that are listening that are in those roles, let me tell you, that's no longer the case.
Yeah.
Vulnerability actually will allow you to have people to want to work for you and support you and have your back.
Yeah.
And we can get into that at a later time.
Yeah.
But
we will. But
so the vulnerability of myself talking to Joel, and then him doing it in return, I'm saying, okay, there was just a lot of things that were connective. There's, a lot of positivity there. And as we just started to talk, I think Joel, you kind of mentioned that you're just in a weird spot with your career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't you kind of hit on that?
Yeah. It's interesting when I've never told you this. When I think back to those first few conversations, smoking cigars on your porch, talking about the woes of where we are, I thought about one of my favorite books of all time is Pilgrim's Progress. Love it. I read it as a kid. I have the children's version, which isn't that much easier to read. And I thought of Josh as the companion for Christian, which is hopeful. And hopeful is the one that teams up with Christian after he leaves Vanity. And Vanity was the city where his other friend, Faithful, was executed. And it was this, so I had to make sure I remembered it. But it was, so he's in this really dark place trying to figure out what's next. He just lost his companion. And they were executed Faithful was executed because he was living against what the world wanted him to. And Hopeful comes along and is one of the main people who helps guide and be there for Christian as he goes through his journey towards Mount Zion. And I thought of Josh as a version of Hopeful in my life because we had just moved down from Delaware. We had just went through an incredible church hurt. So I used to be a pastor. I used to be someone who was trying to help revitalize a church up in the north. I started out as a young pastor. I've been in ministry my entire life because my mom and dad were, pastors, partners in ministry, right? And so my dad was a pastor. My mom was the pastor's wife, and that was our life. And so we lived pastors' kids' lives, and then we went to ministry. And so I'd just been incredibly betrayed by not only the church that let us go up in the north, but then the church that sent us. And I had walked through incredible pain. My wife was still walking through pain. I'd been done with counseling, some intense counseling. But there was still the very similar hurt of, in my own life, I have put pain in my own life. I've been the one who's pushed pain into my own life by just being an idiot, not living life well. But then having someone betray me in such a way, and betray my wife, which, it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. You can hurt me all you want. If you hurt Joanna, it's over. Like, you're dead to me, I'm done.
Right.
Because I just can't. I can't have that happen. I have to protect my wife. I feel very passionately about that. And to have two places do that in the span of like 3 months, it was it. And so we get down here, but the Lord He provides, helps me get this job at Cisco. It's fantastic. It's paying the bills. It's great. But then I realize, okay, out of the frying pan and into the fire, corporate America is not that much better. And I realize, okay, I'm here. I get brought in at the lowest position, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, I don't want to be full of myself. I don't want to be braggadocious. But I know I can be a better manager than my manager is right now. And then I know I could even be a better manager than his manager. And then I know I could even be better than his manager. So I keep thinking, okay, so what is the plan here, God? I know I need to be humbled, and I'm being humbled. And if it really is just to cut my teeth, being humbled, learning the what not to do in the arena of corporate America, then that's great. If that's what it takes. But then we would talk, and I would be like, okay, I'm in it, Josh. I accept it, but bro, is there any way you can get me out of here? Like, every time we talk, he's like, do you know any jobs in the area? I'll work at the hospital. I don't even care. And we would just talk, and we would talk about leadership stuff. And you would bring up issues that you're facing where you're working, or things you faced in the past. And I would talk about it. And we would just kind of see that we were so aligned in everything we were saying, because we both had a heart for not just seeing better leaders exist and not having bad leaders in leadership position, but developing people, which has always been a big part of me, right? So I was a kid who very quickly learned how to watch people and observe, and then everything was stored in the bank of my mind. Okay, so that person had that happen to them, and they did this. So you could probably test that, and they would do it again. And I was that kid. I was that middle schooler, high schooler who would manipulate people as a test of a hypothesis to see if I do this, they do that. And so I quickly learned how people work and interplay and interdynamics and relationships and stuff like that in a bad way. I'm not saying it's good. Don't ever do that.
Sure.
But I saw that as someone who went to school for psychology and got my master's in psychology and counseling, I saw how little things add up to have a greater impact in negative ways, and how leaders, so many of the leaders and so many of the managers that we were frustrated with, all of it could be traced back to how it was modeled for them, how they didn't have it modeled for them, what happened when they're younger. So even like you talked about, which I don't think people understand. They hear your story and they go, "That's great, that's wonderful. I love that you rose above bootstraps, pulled them up." But what they don't see is that you were formed by the negative interactions you had as a child, that you decided you were going to be the person that was not the victim. And so that is why you care so deeply about leadership, and you are such a powerful and impactful leader. Is because you grew through that. And you can look back and go, that really was the genesis. Like you were saying, there was a genesis. It was when you were in elementary school and all those times that happened.
Absolutely.
And a lot of leaders today have literally never thought that. They've never taken a moment to think, why am I doing what I'm doing? Right? Like, why did I hire that person? Why do I care about this right now? What do I even want out of my life? And how do I think I can help other people get there? So many of the leaders in today are just scraping by. I mean, I've had managers who have no time in their day to invest in the people around them that they have under them, because they're just trying to get by.
And sadly, that's very common.
Right.
There's a conveyor belt that is moving,
Yeah.
and they have to stay on it.
You got it.
Yeah.
And if they deviate from the system and what is already in place, then they risk falling off that conveyor belt and any opportunity to move on to the next one.
Yep. You know what that's called?
Tell me.
Selfishness.
Yeah, absolutely.
No,
absolutely.
And it may sound really harsh. And I don't want to sound harsh, but the reality is that how we structure leadership, especially in corporate America, it needs to drastically change, in that we need to give individual contributors more of an opportunity to just do that, and give good leaders more of an opportunity to lead, and hold leaders to accountable in the sense of, if you are not committed to also the growth of the people under you, not just the growth of the business or the growth of their role within the business, you're not fit to be a leader.
No.
Because if you can't, because that's why you're so great. That's one of the reasons why you're recognized for everything that you're doing as the role that you're at right now, and you're already being recognized by other people as we're developing hype around Viewpoint, is because you've proven through your acumen and through your body of work that you can handle both leading the organization and leading the development of the people that you have around you, and that's why you stand out.
Well, I appreciate that, but you know what's crazy about it is we're talking about all this stuff, right? And it's not rocket science.
No,
that's the crazy part, right, Brad? Is there's probably people listening that's like, he just called me selfish because I want to move up on the chain, right?
Right. Joel's really harsh.
Yeah.
Hey, truth does hurt. And I think all of us sitting here can say we've had selfish moments.
Amen.
In leading.
Amen. Yeah. Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
And here's the crazy part. Guess what? I want to be the biggest and the best I can possibly be too. I want to make as much money as I can possibly make too.
Millions and millions.
Millions and millions, right? I want to have all the fancy sports cars and all that good stuff.
Amen.
Good. That we should all, strive for those things if that's important to you.
Right.
But it's at what cost?
Yeah.
Right? So I get more joy and pleasure out of watching those that I manage be successful.
Yeah.
The more that I put my time and efforts into others and they succeed, I get more enjoyment out of that than any award I could ever get. And guess what? When you develop those people and you pour yourself into them, not yourself, they are going to work extremely hard for you. They're going to have your back. They are going to help you produce the outcomes that you need. And then guess who looks good on the back end? you.
Yeah.
And then guess who has the opportunity to have those next levels, right? Move into the next part of your leadership and getting the raises and all that good stuff. So I think it's really about getting out of your own way, right? And knowing that, okay, I want to be as high as I can possibly be, but not through me. I'm going to do that through other success.
Yeah.
It's the legacy impact that because every single person can leave an impact, will leave an impact, will leave a legacy. And it just goes back to this psychological term and idea of sonder, which is the reality that every single person at every moment is living their own life, which we never think about. And when you say it, people are like, that's stupid, that's duh. It's true, but the reason why you go, oh, it's stupid, is because you're not thinking about the fact that everyone is a main character in their life, and we are at best an auxiliary character in their lives.
Yeah.
And so every person underneath you is the main character in their life who has years and years and years and years and years of experience, of life experience that's led up to this point, of childhood stuff that they've gone through or thought through. And you, in a position above them, have the opportunity to leave such a positive impact that would help them as the main character in their story.
Correct.
Right? But if we don't think like that and we just think of people as a resource that is expendable, then that's not going to happen. And that's why I think Viewpoint is so important. What we're doing is because we have, because we talk about this all the time, we have a very real, in the forefront of our minds, understanding of, if you want to say it again, Saunders, which is just, we know that Brad is the main character in his story, and Andy's the main character in his story. And anyone who's listening, you are the main character in your story, and you have hopes and dreams and hurts and joys. And as a leader, we want you to get to the best version of yourself in that you also bless other people to become their best version of themselves.
Right.
And that only comes from that viewpoint.
And the biggest thing out of all those things you just said is have ownership in it.
Yeah.
Right? I struggled with that, right? I tried to erase my past at times. I tried to erase who I was, or being so disappointed in how I did things in the past. You know what? I own it now. Yeah. Because that is what made me who I am today. So I think that aligns exactly with what you're saying. So Brad, to get back to your question from the beginning, that is why I like Joel.
Okay. Yeah.
That's where we aligned.
Yeah. So
it's about the shoes.
So then that brings us to the inevitable question for a listener who's hearing all of this and trying to make out, all right, what is this? Is this worth my time?
Yeah.
Because I've got thousands of other options that there's some that are good and there's some that are not so good.
Absolutely.
What is it about Viewpoint? And pardon me, we'll edit that part out. What is it about this podcast, The View from Up Here, that you see as a different vision for the aspiring leader and the seasoned leader to utilize as a resource?
That's a great question. You know, first thing I want to say is we are not I can't talk. We're going to get that out too. We are not trying to take away from any other podcast, right? Or any other leaders and their view of how leadership is. That's what's great about it, right? Is everybody has a different look and a different approach to that. That's okay. I think that what makes us different from others is that we're not reading a book, or we're not coming to you with, here's the top 5 ways of being a good leader, right? We are bringing true
real life
instances that we have both been through. And you know what's so neat about it is our goal on the front end isn't about making you a better leader.
Interesting.
And some of you might be thinking that, wait, what?
Yeah. I thought this was under Apple Podcasts. It says leadership and development.
I'm ready to move on. What?
It's about identifying, number one, who you are, because who you are is what's going to drive who you are as a leader.
Right.
And it's about identifying that and being okay with that, taking the good from it, taking the bad from it, and learning from it, right?
Yeah.
But then once you truly accept who you are, the way that you think, the way that you interact with others, once you understand that, then that's where, as Viewpoint Leadership, but specifically this podcast, we're going to talk to you and give you experiences and have guests that are going to come on here that align with that vision, right? To figure out who you are at the core, and then we're going to go ahead and help develop you from there, right? I think it's so important to understand that you don't wake up and you're a leader. You know, Joel and I had a conversation about this the other day, Brad, that there's so many different schools out there that you sign up, right? I want to go to college to be a business major, right? And I want to be a leader. And guess what? You pay that amount of money, guess what you get to go be? You get to go learn how to be a business major and a leader.
Right.
That has nothing to do with if you're truly meant to be a leader.
Right. Yeah. And I think what sets us up, like, why listen to this podcast? I think another thing too is you get an opportunity to listen to Josh and I be vulnerable and honest.
Yeah.
Whenever you listen to it from the perspective where we're at, right? So we're going to talk about the shortcomings we've had as leaders and people who develop others. We're going to talk about victories we've had. We're going to talk about examples of things we're doing right now. So whether it is mantra stuff, which you'll hear about later for me, or just like what we do is when we think about the leadership culture in America or and all that kind of stuff. So you get an opportunity to listen, maybe peek behind the curtain, you could say, about who Josh and I are, how we think about things, but then also you get to walk away with a call to action. You get to walk away with okay, here's what we talked about today. Now, what are you going to do as a result, right? Which I think a lot of leadership curriculum out there has call to actions, but it's like Josh is saying, it's not out of
It's black and white.
Right. It's not out of a better understanding of who you are. Right. It's not out of, it's just kind of like, here's the framework we want you to fit in. Here are the action steps you then do as a result. Here are the possible outcomes you could get. Right. With us, it's like, I don't know what your outcome could be because I don't know you well enough yet, but I'd love to help you find that outcome after we figure out where you should be and then what action steps would happen for you. Yeah.
It's driven by honesty.
Yeah. And I think one of the most dangerous myths in leading and just leadership in general is that somehow over the generations of leaders, we have allowed ourselves to believe that somehow who I am at work or at an organization can be different from who I am at home or in the community.
Right.
And it just does not work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
We bring personal into work. I don't care what anybody says.
Yep. Absolutely.
We bring personal into work. We bring work back to personal. Yep. Now, do we have to do some work to keep those divided up and filter all that out? Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
But this myth that somehow we can be separate people, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
We have to recognize who we truly are, like you were saying, Josh. Yeah. And then how do we work at that to be impactful and influential in sacrificial ways throughout all of these parts of our life? So you were talking earlier before about who people can expect, not to say, hey, this person's name, that person's name.
Right.
But when you think about individuals from leadership spheres, like what are you thinking about that we'll be able to hear from on the podcast?
Yeah, I think that, just some people that I have that come to mind right away. These are people that actually have like-minded approaches to leadership that have also struggled in their lives personally, that have helped structure them to who they are and how they are as a leader right now. And I think that, it's important to have a nice diversity, right, of leadership approaches, but we don't want to bring somebody in here to talk to you all that doesn't align with what our core values are as a company, right? So there's going to be a lot of commonalities, right? But there will be some diversity there. And I think that we want people that are going to be vulnerable and honest to tell their story, right? There's so many people that are going to be listening to this podcast that are in a season in their life that's meant, man, I'd love to be a leader someday. And I have self-doubt. I don't believe in myself. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? I'm a leader, right? And I also now own a company and we're doing this. And guess what? I have self-doubt. I struggle with self-doubt.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about letting people hear leaders that can be vulnerable, that they can truly connect to, not just from a leadership standpoint, but, to the core of who they are, so they can sit there and say, you know what, darn it, I can do this too. Yeah. Right? And what can they gain from our guest is the most important part to help mold them, right? To help develop them. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Joel, when you think about, as we get ready to wrap up this episode, as you think about, for our listeners, just one thing that they can be thinking about as they close out this episode and they're thinking about, all right, I'm going to be subscribing, I'm going to be liking, I'm going to be coming back and listening until they get on to the next episode with us. What's something that they could be thinking about that kind of shapes what this podcast is and what they can be thinking about as they interact with it.
Yeah. I would go back to something that I ask everyone all the time when I'm doing all the mantra stuff is, what drives you? Like, just take a moment after you've listened to us talk. We just talked about what drives us.
Right.
Yeah.
So what drives you? Whether you're in the car right now or just listening at home or listening on a run, in this moment, what is the thing that if you just took a second, first thought comes to mind, what is motivating everything that you do? And make note of that. Write it down. Put it in a note on your phone or something like that, and then go back to it every episode as you listen. Maybe see if it's changed. Maybe see if it's kind of boiled down to something more simple or something more complex. But yeah, think about what drives you, what motivates you.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Hey, thank you guys for your time and helping us get this all kicked off.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah. Thank you, Brad.